From rocks to rockets, from grain to gold chains, wealth has always defined power, status, and survival. Ever wondered how being rich evolved through history? Well, no waiting around. Let's dive right in.
What it was like to be rich throughout every era of history. The Stone Age. In the Stone Age, wealth was measured in terms of resources and survival capabilities almost solely. To be considered rich, one would need an abundance of essential resources, such as food, tools, and materials for shelter and clothing, which at the time primarily consisted of wood, animal pelts, organic materials such as large leaves, and essentially sticks and dirt. Possessing skills in hunting, gathering, and toolmaking would also be extremely valuable. On top of that, forming strong social bonds and alliances within one's tribe or community would enhance the access to resources and collective security. What this means is the more friends you had, the more people that you had to potentially help and protect you if things got wild, which back in the Stone Age, they did a lot.
So basically, Stone Age wealth wasn't gold or crypto. It was sticks, pelts, and how many buddies you had to watch your back when a saber-toothed tiger came knocking. Imagine flexing with a really sharp rock instead of a Rolex. And honestly, tribal alliances back then were the original social networks, except instead of likes, you got actual food and not being eaten. Survival was the ultimate currency, and friendship was literally priceless.
Accumulating and managing resources like animal hides for clothes, flint for tools, and a steady food supply through effective hunting and foraging were a key to thriving in this era, and was truly the key of becoming and staying rich or wealthy, which, if it isn't already obvious, just means to be alive. Your survival was your wealth, as that was all there was to look forward to. If you could survive another day and you had the resources to make it through that day successfully, you were well off. It goes without saying that there wasn't necessarily coinage in the Stone Age, at least not in the early Stone Age, and as far as the absolute origin of money, that is still something that is not fully known or understood. But during the Stone Age, possessing skills and having access to practical, life-enabling resources was the pinnacle of wealth. During the Stone Age, if you had a cozy cave that you could call your own, you had a few pelts to wrap around your naked, hairy, stinky body, you had basic flint and obsidian tools to catch little critters, and you had a good group of friends that you could eat rocks with, you were set. But not just set, you were also wealthy. Just picture it now. Not a phone in sight. Just you, all of your best boys wearing small loincloths, hitting each other over the head with big wooden clubs, just being in the moment. Sounds pretty good to me.
I love this simple trust me bro style of storytelling. It feels like history class, but taught by that one chaotic cousin at a BBQ, and honestly, Stone Age wealth being just not dying today is kind of refreshing. No stock markets, no NFTs, just you, your pelts, and your best bros bonking each other with clubs. Simpler times, like minimalism, but with mammoths trying to trample you instead of student loans.
The Bronze Age. No, not LeBron's age, the Bronze Age. Not to be confused with LeBron James, I'm talking about the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age took place between 1330 BC and 1200 BC and signified a large leap in civilization for a few reasons, most notably the production of bronze. This era, while short compared to the Stone Age, which literally lasted millions of years, had significant technological advancements, which propelled society massively. If you're unfamiliar, all bronze is melted down tin with a larger amount of melted down copper. This alloy was easy to produce and readily available, and the production of this alloy and subsequently the tools made from it allowed for rapid development in both agriculture and warfare. With that being said, what did it look like to be rich, and how was wealth measured during the Bronze Age? During this time, wealth began to be associated with the control and production of bronze. Being rich meant that you had access to these metal ores and the knowledge of crafting weapons, tools, and other ornaments. Trade became more prominent, so establishing strong trade networks and engaging in commerce was also a massive way to improve your wealth. These were some of the earliest economies ever. Additionally, owning agricultural land and livestock, which were crucial for food and trade, would signify wealth. Similar to the Stone Age, both of these are directly tied with life.
LeBron's age would have been cool. Imagine cavemen debating his stats. But the Bronze Age was basically humanity's DLC pack. Suddenly, copper and tin had kids, and boom, bronze tools, sharper weapons, shinier jewelry. Being rich wasn't just, I have food, it was, I own the metal that makes me cooler and harder to stab. Trade networks popped up like ancient Amazon Prime, and landowners basically became the OG landlords. Wealth was finally about flexing, not just surviving.
Now, for almost the first time, social status was also playing a role control with your wealth, with leaders often amassing wealth through tribe control over resources. So what exactly did it look like to be rich? Well, during the Bronze Age, we saw some of the earliest civilizations. So with that, we would see villages and larger communities living in one place. With that being said, if you were wealthy, you obviously had a nicer place or a larger place or potentially in a prime piece of the community, closer to the water or the farm. Besides that, we also saw irrigation agriculture, which basically means bringing the water to your crops. So if you were wealthy at this time, your farm that you had control or access to had an irrigation system built into it for convenience. And similar to the Bronze Age, if you had a good, strong network of people that you could trade with and access to tools and knowledge on how to build tools, you were pretty well off. Just imagine you and all your friends wearing slightly more animal pelts in a bigger group of people with a nice farm and a slightly bigger mud hut made with actual wood and nicer materials. You guys are all sitting around the forge making bronze swords and whatnot. Seems like a cool time. In ancient Sumeria during the Bronze Age, one of the earliest known currencies was actually grain. Grain was used as a popular method of trade. Besides grain, there has been some mysterious clay tokens that have been suspected to be used as a means of trade. And then as the Bronze Age continues, silver becomes a very popular means of currency, and then later after that, gold as well. So without getting too far into the weeds, during the Bronze Era, if you had a lot of social status, access to both land, agriculture, and animals, if you had a prime plot of real estate, and you had a steady supply of bronze and you knew how to make good tools, you were really well off. And then on top of that, if you had a large supply of silver and gold, then you were rich.
So the Bronze Age was the first time keeping up with the Joneses actually mattered, except the Joneses had irrigation and you were still bucket hauling water like a medieval DoorDash. Wealth now meant location. A prime mud hut near the river was basically beachfront property, and grain as currency? Imagine flexing a whole granary instead of a sports car. Then silver and gold show up, and suddenly wealth went from I have bread to I am breaded.
The Iron Age. The Iron Age is a bit of an interesting era because at this point you might think that it was simply caused out of pure evolution and innovation, and up until this point everything's just been linear progress, but that's actually not the case. And during the Bronze Age, at least near the very end of the Bronze Age, there was multiple significant factors happening that caused a huge decline in production, literacy, trade routes, wealth, and overall progress for humans as a whole. And the very end of the Bronze Era and the beginning of the Iron Age was actually considered more or less of a dark time in humanity. The Bronze Age was more or less of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of deal. And with the beginning of the Iron Age, we see almost more or less of a redo of the Bronze Age, but obviously with a new metal. We have iron, a much more valuable and a much stronger material. Following the same trend, however, the Iron Age was shorter than the Bronze Age simply because technological advancements took place quicker and humans were able to evolve more rapidly, even after the setbacks. With that being said, being wealthy in the Iron Age wasn't much different than being wealthy in the Bronze Age, as a lot of the same customs and traditions existed and the same means of production and wealth accumulation were in play. In the Iron Age, wealth was closely tied to the possession and production of iron, similar to bronze in the Bronze Age. Mastery of ironworking techniques to create durable tools and weapons provided a significant advantage to anyone looking to become truly wealthy. Rich individuals or communities would control iron deposits and forges, facilitating trade with military strength, either from their own community or even other communities. Agricultural advancements continued to be important, so owning and controlling fertile land and livestock remained to be a very prominent sign of wealth. Power and influence were also consolidated through warfare and alliances, with wealthy individuals holding positions of authority and accumulating wealth through tribute and trade. The Iron Age still yet didn't have coinage, and a lot of wealth was held in gold nuggets, gold sheets, gold ornaments, gold jewelry, fertile land, livestock, access to iron production, and access to military power and influence.
The Iron Age was basically humanity's software update after a crash. The Bronze Age ends in chaos, trade collapses, literacy nosedives, then iron swoops in like, don't worry guys, I got this. Stronger weapons, sturdier tools, faster progress. But wealth still meant the same basics: land, livestock, and shiny metal stuff. Only now iron was the VIP pass, and without coinage yet, people flexed with literal gold nuggets. Imagine walking around with your net worth jangling in your pockets like a medieval rapper.
The Medieval Era, aka the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages. This era took place immediately after the fall of the Roman Empire, beginning in 476 AD, and lasted for roughly 1,000 years until 1400 AD. During this time, wealth had become a lot lot more multifaceted and also more centralized on your connection with the powers that be. Besides the king and other royalty, the richest members of society in medieval times were the nobility and merchants. The richest of merchants were those who engaged in long-distance trade, specifically of luxury goods such as spices, silk, and precious metals, all of which were extreme signs of wealth. And although the levels of wealth between nobles varied quite significantly, the richest of nobles were those that controlled the most amount of land and had the closest connections to the monarch. Regardless of noble or merchant, at the top of each of these levels, life was pretty similar. These individuals would have their own dedicated castles, fully staffed with servants. They would have large estates and farms that would be maintained by peasants and serfs. They would have luxury goods such as expensive dyes, luxurious silk clothing, expensive gold jewelry, and access to an almost unlimited supply of food and entertainment of many varieties, if you catch my drift. On top of this, the richest in society also had access to great education, something that was still a large rarity for a majority of the population. This includes reading, writing, literature, and access to other scholarly texts. Now, with this being said, if you were rich in this time period, you had an amazing opportunity to live a life of leisure and luxury. But although that wasn't the case for many people, and the wealth gap during the Middle Ages was severe. Now, with that being said, it wasn't all fine and dandy for the rich of this time, because no matter what your financial status was during this time, you were still susceptible to disease, famine, and war. Just picture it. You're hanging out with all your boys. You're in your castle with torches everywhere. Your servant just brought you a big leg of lamb, and you all are drinking out of gem-encrusted solid gold goblets. You all cheers and spill wine on your expensive silk shirts, but you don't even care because you're so rich. You have a guy in a silly hat come do a dance for you, and then you go to bed and do it all again the next day. Seems pretty cool to me, but let's move on.
The medieval era was peak rich people cosplay. Nobles flexed castles like medieval mansions, with peasants basically acting as their HOA fees. Merchants running the spice and silk trade were the Bezos of their day, except instead of free 2-day shipping, you risked pirates and plague. Wealth got you silk shirts, gold goblets, and a personal jester, aka your own Netflix subscription. But even if you were loaded, the Black Death didn't care. One flea bite and suddenly your estate party had no after party.
The early modern era. Bros, we are getting extremely close to the modern era, but we're not quite there yet. We are currently in the early modern era, which takes place roughly from 1500 AD to 1800 AD. And this era of time is likely one of the most influential eras when it comes to the structure of the world that we live in today. Let me explain. In the early modern era, wealth was driven by exploration, trade, and colonization. Nations and individuals who invested in voyages reaped enormous profits from new trade routes and new resources. Merchants and bankers accumulated wealth through the large global trade of goods like spices, textiles, and precious metals. The rise of capitalism and establishment of joint stock companies allowed for the pooling of resources and the sharing of risks and rewards. Owning land and engaging in agriculture still continued to be important, but the growing influence of commerce, finance, and manufacturing marked a significant shift on how wealth was perceived and earned in the early modern day. Up until this point, all it really took to be rich was having a cow, having a little bit of dirt to your name, and maybe a few shekels. Well, not even shekels, literally just bits of silver and having the right friends. But as we got into the early modern era, a lot of things seemed to change. We saw early globalization, early capitalism, early colonization, and the basis for the society that we all live in today. This was a pretty influential and pretty important 300-year run, in my opinion. And with that being said, what did it look like to be rich in the early modern era? Well, honestly, a lot more of the same. Bigger houses, more loot, more money, more connections, more food, more entertainment, bigger boats, more security. The biggest difference was the means of accumulating these resources. And if you were the type of person to be going on these conquests or voyages, then your life was extremely hectic, spending months or even years at sea to potentially come home empty-handed or never even come home at all. People were just playing Assassin's Creed Black Flag in real life. With that being said, everything was just sunshine and rainbows, right? Definitely not, like at all. But we're talking about being rich, so yeah, being rich was pretty awesome almost all the time. And in the early modern era, we saw for almost the first time how being wealthy started to shift.
The early modern era was capitalism's awkward teen phase. Suddenly wealth came from ships, spices, and stock companies instead of just cows and dirt. Merchants could hit jackpot or die of scurvy trying, while nobles flexed bigger houses and bigger boats. It was basically Assassin's Creed Black Flag meets Wall Street, colonization, commerce, and powdered wigs all tangled into one messy but profitable era.
The modern modern era. And just like that, in the last 11 and a half minutes, we went from millions of years ago in the Stone Age to the modern day. Now, the modern era is kind of blended into the early modern era, so there's no exact start date, but for the sake of this video, we'll consider it from 1800 until present day. In the modern era, wealth has been increasingly associated with industrialization, innovation, and finance. The Industrial Revolution transformed economies, creating vast fortunes for those who owned factories, mines, and railways. In the contemporary world, wealth is often derived from investments in technology, real estate, and financial markets. Entrepreneurs and business owners who innovate and scale their business can achieve substantial wealth. Education and knowledge has become a critical asset, and advanced degrees and specialized skills open doors to lucrative careers. Globalization and digital technologies such as the internet have further expanded opportunities for wealth creation across diverse sectors and regions. I would say that the world we live in today is pretty great, and we enjoy a lot of modern luxuries, and we have so many amazing opportunities right at our fingertips. Never before has the world been so decentralized, meaning that anybody has the opportunity to do great things. Whereas in the past, if you were a serf or a peasant working on a noble's farm, you had almost zero chance of being anything more than that. With that being said, in the modern day, especially as in present day, the amount of opportunities of getting wealthy thanks to the internet is almost limitless. But even at the beginning of the modern era, near the Industrial Revolution, opportunities were starting to present themselves everywhere. And obviously we got off to a rough start with extreme amounts of child labor, including chimney sweeps, factory workers, and a lot of horrible stuff that definitely isn't great, but got a lot of people rich. With that being said, what does it look like to be rich in the modern day? Well, fortunately, I don't think I have to paint too much of a crazy picture for you guys. And honestly, I think in the modern day, wealth is really what you make of it. Because of the vast amount of opportunities, it can be whatever you want it to be.
The modern era is where wealth basically hit God mode. Industrialization minted factory barons, rail tycoons, and coal kings, while today it's tech bros, hedge funds, and people selling pixelated apes for millions. Unlike the past, you don't need land or lineage, just Wi-Fi and maybe a questionable startup idea. But let's not forget, early modern wealth came with child chimney sweeps, while today's comes with unpaid interns. Different century, same grind set.
If you have enough money to sustain yourself, then your wealth could look like living in a van that you own and have enough money coming in on a monthly basis to maintain your lifestyle. Or it could look like the biggest mansion full of the craziest watches and cars and gold doubloons. Now, for a generalization, the rich of today typically enjoy compounding interest with their investments, a good portfolio of real estate, freedom of time by having tasks delegated through their employees, and freedom of location and time, meaning that they can work where they want, when they want. That is, if they want to. Now, one thing I will say, bros, is that I just tried to sum up millions of years of history in under 15 minutes, so if something doesn't sound fully right, just remember, trust me, bro. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making it, and I felt like it's been too long since I made a history-based video. So let me know what you guys thought, and if you guys have any ideas for other interesting videos like this, please leave them down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and like always, trust me, bro.
We've basically gone from cavemen flexing rocks to nobles flexing castles to billionaires flexing rockets. And the through line is that wealth always equals power, status, and a little bit of chaos. It's wild to think that what started as having food for tomorrow has evolved into influencing the stock market with a single tweet. Wealth is whatever you make of it now, whether that's a cozy van life, a crypto empire, or just freedom of time. Trust Me Bro did an amazing job with this video. The link's in the description if you want to check it out. As for the next video, let's just say it's going to be something big, surprising, and definitely worth the wait. Stay nerdy.